Hey, good to see you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me? Yeah. Oh, and Karen. That's wonderful. Yeah. Let's see. Um, oh, what happened? My system's jumping around all over the place. So sorry, I keep losing this. I'm having lots of computer trouble, unfortunately, but I guess we're good. And, oh my God.
Hi there, I'm Karin.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good. I have a very hungry dog who is supposed to wait another hour to eat, so we'll see if he's going to disrupt things or not.
That's okay. Victoria should be on shortly. She's
Perfect.
up in her own
Zoom land.
corner office. There we go. Oh, great. Always wonderful to get JP. Let's see. Hello there.
Good morning.
Yes, it's good morning in Western Australia.
A very early
5 o'clock in
morning.
the morning or something. Is it 5 or 6?
Yeah, it's early, so I'm
my
off
God.
camera.
Oh, well, thank you for joining anyway. I mean, that's great.
Of course, this is one of my favorite events.
Oh, so great.
Hello, everybody.
Now, is there any interference, Victoria, if I just keep running it this way?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I don't hear it.
Great. Because you know, my hands-free thing is not really working that great, and so if I can do it like this on speaker. Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. Give it another minute or so, but we can start maybe doing check-ins, and I can start doing that and then pass it along. Pretty good day today. Cold around here. We're in Rochester, New York, so not far from Toronto, and not probably much the same weather. And I don't know, where are you, Karen?
I'm in Ithaca, so we're neighbors right now.
Oh,
I'm not going to
wow.
be here that long, but yeah.
Okay.
So.
Well,
Where are you going?
I'm going to Mexico in January, and I've just been kind of planning to relocate, but I'm not sure where. So.
Well, I grew up
Exciting.
partly in Mexico, so that's really
Oh,
exciting. And of course,
wonderful.
Mexico 70 years ago is a whole different kettle of fish.
Right. Wow, lucky you.
Yeah.
When you relocate, are you going to be in another country or here in the United States?
Well, I went to Costa Rica the beginning of 2022 and had intended to actually go back there now, but got kind of waylaid for family reasons here. So now I'm going to go check out Mexico and visit actually a bunch of some regenerative sites with a colleague who's deep into regenerative business stuff. And we're going to see from there what I'm just really following what transpires. And that's such a privilege, to be able to do that. So
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself, Preston? Maybe say a few words?
Absolutely. A little bit overwhelmed. Let's see, very quickly, I was on the call with the bioregional activator group Benji had done earlier today. I have been following at the periphery this group for 2+ years, but with not being familiar, so distant and so far away with Toronto, I hadn't been very engaged. However, learning recently that there's a regional activation possibly going on here, it was time to jump back in, get a little more involved, and see what ways I can contribute, and take a look again at what's here and what how to do that. So
Great,
I am
great.
here now.
And have you met the Puppas who are from Toronto also, and they're
No.
big
I think
on,
they're in Kitchener. Are they?
yeah? Well, they talk about the Toronto bioregion.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't-
Well, we
I
should,
don't even know, maybe they're just in Markham or something.
well, it's,
Yeah,
I think you should definitely connect.
yeah, well, we should connect you somehow.
Yeah, I've been very independent myself, out from everything, coming in from some very unusual serendipitous angles, and so that's part of this journey, is learning who's doing what, how valid things are, in the sense that, you know, we live in such a colonial construct that is so disparate from where we want to be, and so I haven't had a lot of time to put towards understanding that sort of filtering and framework, and so looking forward to it.
Right.
So if you could put your contact information in the chat, we'll
Sure.
make sure to connect you with Jonathan. Will you do that to make
Oh,
sure? to
yeah,
connect you with
sure.
Brian Pippa and
And
Susan.
it can even be done on Mighty Networks. And
Yeah,
Brian and Susan
Uh,
are actually, you know, really coordinating efforts to, you know, create bioregional activation there. And I think have invited Joe Brewer to come to Toronto. So
did you know that?
yeah, I think that's what
Wow.
got him on.
Oh,
Yes. So and so JP, if you're still still up or just getting a cup of coffee. That's all right.
I'm actually getting rid of my bedhead so I can eventually be on screen with you guys.
Oh,
Uh,
wonderful.
I'm happy to check in. So I'll just check in invisibly for the moment. It is a beautiful early summer morning in Western Australia, and we are having cool nights and warm days. This is one of my favorite times of year here. And I have the pair of doves who are nesting in my yard, which makes me very happy. And also, the jacaranda trees are in bloom, so there's purple everywhere.
Hmm.
And that's my check-in. So let's see, who have we not heard from yet? Well, Victoria. How are you?
yeah, sure. So I'm doing great. We had lots of great conversations today and just found out our neighbor is doing some incredible work in
Biochar?
bioremediation and all kinds of interesting things with mushroom substrate and biochar and methane, farmers. So Jonathan understands more of this bigger concept. I do understand some of what he was talking about, but it's really great to have somebody 2 houses away who's doing that. How likely is that, right? More and more.
Mhm. Great, great. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for being here and see if we can come up with a way to sustain the right livelihood effort in such a way as to help people who really are struggling with this. I mean, you know, I think most of you saw the exchange with, I think it was Sarah in the UK. And did you see that? Everybody said it was just a verbal thing because it's 10 o'clock at night in London and she has 2 small kids. And so she said she wouldn't be able to get on. And I don't know if we but basically her story is that she's not working right now because she hated her job and left it. Her husband's doing a job that he hates, and they're both of them trying to become the new regens, and they're not quite sure how to pull it off and still be able to pay the bills. So that, I have this long-term fantasy that Earth Regenerators is going to be able to develop an economic platform that people can join and participate in and find a way, with the help of others, to transition into what would be a right livelihood for them. And we've seen some really extraordinary projects, mostly from people who start them off without any financing. There was just an incredible one last night with a new magazine called The Weave. And I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a really beautiful publication. And this woman who's put it together has obviously spent months doing it. And they put it up on Issue, and they've had about 200,000 hits. I think that people have downloaded the stuff. And so they're hoping to try and find a way to make it viable over the long term, that they can do this and become one of the main publications for the Regenaissance. And they certainly have a wonderful aesthetic and a very fine way of writing from what I've read so far. But that's the agenda, and it was all Victoria's idea. And so I'm going to let her explain why we're even here.
Well, and I'm very interested in having Karen talk with us, because I heard from Jonathan that, Karen, you've been somewhat immersed in this topic of right livelihood, and that you've been actually working in this area, providing services. And so I've been always, I don't know if you've heard of What Color Is Your Parachute?
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I did that, gosh, in the 70s. First, and then I kind of revisited the process and passed it on to lots of other people. Really got a lot out of the concept of informational interviewing, interviewing people who have professions that are like the ones that you would like to have, and rather than calling someone up and saying, "Do you know of any jobs?" people are much more willing to talk with you if you have read their background and say, "I think I'd like to do something like you. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you got into it. What do you like about it? What are the drawbacks?" That kind of thing. And then in the end, they do offer you positions or people connections, even though they weren't in the beginning all that interested. Hi, Shane. In talking in the first place, but everyone loves talking about themselves, and especially if they can help someone. It's an easy way to make a difference. So I've just been because I have ADHD, I have discovered, when I just found that out recently, that people like me lose a lot of jobs. And I counted them just this morning. I lost 5 jobs in my career of about 35 years. And I kind of had a sense of why, but I didn't, or what was the difference in the ones that I was excelled at and the ones that I failed at. And I tried to keep avoiding the ones I failed at, but that seemed to be the only avenue open. So I kept doing it and kept failing, except when I'd find one of the other kind of jobs that I was really good at. So, it's really, it's a really sensitive topic now. And I really need to make sure that what I'm planning to do in the next 10 or 15, 20 years is really right on, because I don't have that much runway. And I will be working and needing to make money for a long time. And thank God our health is good. I can't take anything for granted. So I'm still interested in this topic and looking forward so much to hear, Karen, your experience, and that, any words of wisdom and how you might want to be involved with this, with ER, Earth Regenerators, in this topic, and how it might be a win-win. So I'll pass it to
great.
Shane.
Great. Folks, we're just doing check-ins, Shane. No pressure.
Oh, yeah. Shane knows
What have you just passed to me?
we're just doing
Yeah,
check-ins, yeah.
I don't really know how I want to check in. I've been out of the loop for a bit, so I just kind of wanted to come in and hear what's happening at this end, and just maybe get a reminder of some of the things we talk about that I find kind of enjoying and inspiring. I would like to just briefly pick up on the jobs lost and what that might tell you, because I know there's definitely been a few in my pathway that I'd have to identify as,
Oh, wow.
well, it's hard to call them anything but failures in terms of attempts to be something or do something that I clearly wasn't cut out to be or do. And yeah, I feel like I could probably learn a lot from that if I had the patience and I'm not sure, the willingness for introspection, the openness to it. Yeah, I'm not sure I want to elaborate on the failure. No, that's just
Yeah,
that's just
certainly don't
me,
need to dwell on that. But it's a reality that as we begin to think differently, we're also not fitting in too well to the existing culture.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, Patty, would you like to check in and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I want to apologize for being very late.
No.
And then it took me forever to find the link.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Well, I was curious. Joe was just in my town and I couldn't attend his meeting because I had other things going on. I'm in Colorado, by the way.
Which town?
And Paonia.
In Paonia. Okay, he's talked a lot about it. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, he's been here twice in like 3 weeks. Both times I wasn't able to go, but I saw his talk over the hill in Carbondale. They recorded that. And I was drawn to this group with Livelihood, what you were just saying towards the end here about living, knowing, and then still trying to live in this world in a way
Mhm.
that resonates with the knowing. And of all things, I'm a realtor. I sell real estate here, and it's very challenging when people come into town with bags of cash, literally, and our locals can't find housing, and it's a big issue.
Yeah.
And I'm not tied to my career. I would give it up, but because it is generating income, that's right. But it's like you're still holding on to the paradigm, but you want to let go.
Well, and Karen, and it is Karen, right? You pronounce it?
Karen, yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you say a little bit about the work that you've been doing and, give us a kind of a picture of what it's been like and where you're going with it.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, like so many things, this is a very autobiographical path I've been on. I was, I was a med student, hell bent on being a med student, and then by a very interesting and kind of challenging set of circumstances. I ended up being a German major, and worked in Germany for 2 years after my bachelor's, and thought like I have my sexy international job. And then the reality was I'm sitting in a container doing technical translation for balances and scales and filters. I was like, this is not my sexy international job. I went back to school for my master's, and just again, like did a master's in comparative international affairs and natural resource management. And I did an MPA, not an MBA, because I'm allergic to business as usual. And was just kind of disgusted. I mean, I was like, why are we talking about perpetual growth in the economy? And people would look at me like I had horns, and I'm like, why is that a weird question? And when I got done with my degree, I was like, put me in front of a fishery or a forest. I have no clue how to manage natural resources. Like, I just felt like it was all kind of ridiculous. And, then started my windy path of like, okay, how do I figure things out? And I was really on an international development path and ended up back in the States. And so I'm just saying, like, it's, and permaculture was like my road in. So as I started raising my family, I was also building permaculture, co-creating with other folks, permaculture educational institutes and whatnot. And after doing that for a while, I really noticed, one, that there was particular obstacles for women in what, was, especially then, this is like 2003, much more male dominated. There's a lot more visibly, I mean, there's always been women involved, but a lot more visible rock stars that are women now. And I was just like, I want to support women to thrive in permaculture. And one of the things that always came up was earning a living. How do you earn a living? And around that time, I was realizing that my own being allergic to business as usual meant that we were always setting up our nonprofit to just kind of like, we were happy if we like broke even on the budget, and I was like, oh, this is not going to work long term. So that's when I dove into learning about all this. So I've been doing this kind of livelihood stuff since around 2014. And again, I focus mostly first on women in permaculture, and now it's really changed. And I've been working a lot with Carol Sanford and Regenesis now. I've taken their courses and stuff. So really just kind of keeping going with the regenerative part. But what I'd love to say, like related to what some folks said, was it's already been hard for folks who don't feel called by any of the already set paths in the economy. And now, of course, things are so much different, right? Post-COVID, peak everything. We know that climate disruption is coming down the path. So many more people are interested. And there is that, there's this cognitive dissonance if we work inside of organizations that basically by mandate, they're supposed to stay the same, but really in order to shift to be effective in the world, they actually need to drastically change. And so, I'm finding myself working with clients who are like, how do I do this within their high level, managerial folks? And they're like, how do I tend this conversation? I'll get fired, right? Like it's high stakes. And what I find myself telling folks over and over is that so much of the work that we're called to doesn't really exist yet. So it's inherently an innovation process. And it's such a wonderful opportunity to really go through the developmental process of what does it look like to innovate from a regenerative mind, as opposed to just doing all the same stuff we've done before, which just, replicates the mechanistic fragmented thinking. So I'll pause there, but I see that that's a huge theme, and that there's so much people are feeling the risk of it, right? The opportunity and the joy of it, but the risk of it, because either you find an organization who can pay you, who's already doing that work, or you've got to innovate it. And entrepreneurship is a risky business. So how do we do it as safely as possible? And the thing that I'm super excited that I call it, from Carol Sanford, I learned this term, a promise beyond ableness, right? It's something you feel called to that you don't know how the heck yet you're going to do it. But this trip to Mexico with my colleague, who's also deep into the regenerative business work, I'm really interested in what does it look like to be able to design regenerative business ecosystems? Because this is the kicker. It's like, unless we have the systems to support people to make these changes, and the markets, right, the regenerative markets and whatnot already, figured out, it's going to go slower, especially if we're like one business at a time. But what if there's a business that's almost like an acupuncture point in a region, where if you get that one in there and you get that point, figured out and skillfully make an intervention there, then all of a sudden so much more health ripples out and so much more innovation is possible, because, oh, people are learning, oh, now this is how we roll things out from what we've learned, right? And here's how we can kind of keep growing from that. So I'll just pause there and see if any of that was useful for folks, or questions you have, comments.
Maria?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. It totally resonate. And I have an example of a business that's an acupuncture point that I can share. When I first stopped working in the corporate world, I started working with a guy named David Rose, who has founded a company called Just One Organics. Is that the way it goes, Jonathan? Just One, ONE, organics.com. And what it is going into areas that have some organic produce being generated, and knowing that organic produce is a key to a regenerative economy, and to be able to feed people, and there's not enough of it going on almost anywhere. And in order to incentivize farmers to go regenerative, or to go organic, or in some way without the damaging aspect of agriculture, he has been using this gentle drying machine that takes the water out, 94% of the water out, but leaves the taste, the nutrients, the smell, and what you end up with is flakes. And they are very, very high value add. It's just kind of one big machine, from what I understand. You need a huge amount of throughput. So you need a lot of organic material. And what it comes out with at the end is the powder or flakes that he sells to companies that make food bars and sauces and things like that, where they don't need to have the actual whole fruit or a vegetable. It's very, very expensive. It's a costly product, but it's in huge demand, and it also lasts for 10 years without refrigeration. And so it's a solution to many, many, many problems and issues in our food system. And what the design is to find a place where there's enough to start going, and then import until there's enough to use the local produce, to keep the machines, going all the time, because it's not cheap, those installations, a couple of $1 million. And to do that all over the country, which creates a huge value to the food shed, and there's so much going on in the food economy. But this creates an abundance of organic produce. There's an incentive, because the idea is that you buy the ugly fruit, the things that the farmers don't sell, pieces of, because they look bad, but they're perfectly fine. And so you buy certain amount of that at the beginning of the season, and you pay the farmers up front to grow it. They know you've already agreed on the price. And so it's a way of them scaling up production. to meet the demand of this gentle drying center, in addition to their existing customers and how they want to expand. So it's a real win-win. And originally he, we were going after creating banks, local banks, so that they could lend to things like this. And then, you'd look at all of the key pieces of an entrepreneurial economy that's regenerative, and you educate and do job development and financial planning and all that with these community banks that give a quarter of the profits back to the members. And the members invest their money. They're banks, not credit unions, because banks can lend out 10 times what a credit union can only do 3 times. So banks are just a much better way to go. And the idea is to have those all over the country, lending money, training and educating and bringing up to speed the population, lending money to these kind of typical things that every community needs, like home building or energy efficiency consulting, whatever those industries are that are kind of mainstays of a regenerative economy, and to train people for those roles. That's the idea, is to have the banking and the basis for a local circular economy. So I think that really, whether one or another of the kinds of businesses he's been thinking about are an acupuncture point, but certainly I think with regard to food, the Gentle Drying Center is an amazing thing. So he's an amazing entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, happy to connect people with him, but he's created one. What's that?
I just want to connect a couple of dots here, because I believe there's one of these gentle drying operations in Colorado, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
it never happened.
I think it's in Oregon.
In Oregon.
The one that he's got up and running. And I have a friend in Colorado who was developing the plan for it, but he just kind of ran out of runway, needed to move, that kind of thing. So he's got all the plans. It's just he hasn't been able to raise the money.
The other dot that I wanted to connect was that where we met.
But one thing about Colorado, okay, Patty, if this turns you on, he's dying to, and David Rose needs to find somebody who's going to do this in this area, which is west of the Rockies, I guess. I don't know. In Paonia.
I know.
Do you know David Rose?
No, but I know somebody tried doing this. I was approached maybe 5 years ago, trying to find a place. And the problem that's happening here is land is getting expensive. The distance of the farm and transportation costs. I mean, we're the organic growing capital for Colorado, where I'm at.
Yeah.
Whether they're certified organic farms or, mom and pops, no spray, which I prefer to buy from them because they're not in the system with the feds and regulation. But anyways, and it was cost prohibitive to find the space. And that's my beef with real estate in general, and in Colorado in particular. And I think the realtors haven't helped, but then people moving in from other areas have really exacerbated the problem, because we looked really affordable. I mean, I lived in Crested Butte before moving over here, which is a ski area. Now it has multi-million-dollar homes. When I was living there, we didn't really have that yet. And moved over here in 2012, and a house in town was like $100,000. Now you can't find anything under 300, and it was super affordable to live here, and it was doable, and now it's not, and it's heartbreaking.
Right.
And and it's in part the whole using real estate as an investment vehicle and not just housing. that's what screwed it all up, because now people have all these extra homes that's their living now. They're making money off of real estate housing. It's so disheartening.
Well, the other dot I wanted to connect was just that when I met David Rose, it was at a financial permaculture workshop in South Florida. And the Financial Permaculture Institute started up in Tennessee. And of course, I got invited there to speak about incubators because I was running an incubator at the time for renewable energy businesses. But the banking thing really fascinated me. And I think, creating our own financial system is one of the keys to doing this, because as long as we're connected to the debt-based model, where you have to pay back more than they're giving you in the first place, you just have to keep running and running. And in the end, it's not going to get anywhere. So we need to kind of turn this whole thing upside down. But it's, the sense of it is that we need to change it all at once. And we can't do that. There's just not enough of us, and we don't have enough of the control over the existing systems to transform them right away. But I did want to make those connections because it's so important that we can keep putting the pieces together and keep drawing on the expertise and the experience. Sorry, JP.
Can I add one more thing?
So-
I'm not saying it's not possible to do it here. It's totally possible. The last guy gave up because maybe the project was just too big for him. I don't know. We have so much fruit that just rots on trees here. It's unbelievable. Like this summer, you could get boxes of pears for free and apple. People just wanted people to come pick them up. So it is possible. I'm not saying it's not possible.
Mm. And not everyone is an entrepreneur, which is a really important thing to know. It isn't everyone. I've learned that the hard way in entrepreneurial ventures with people who were making that discovery. So, and it's Jonathan and Victoria, did we already cover the territory that we have David in common, or is this new?
David Rose?
Yeah.
I don't think so. No,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah, I've been friends with David for 20 years. So
I'm not
Yeah.
surprised.
that's a very, 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 very small world. So how great. And it's so interesting, his journey as well, because he started because he has lived for so long in Hawaii. He started there,
Yeah.
fruit capital, right? Like this is just such an abundant place. But Hawaii was importing 90% of its food. And he thought that was ridiculous. And that was the genesis of the first gentle drying efforts. And I met him when he had been doing that already for some time. And I kept his packet of pineapple powder. I had that thing for years. It never lost potency. And it was like a little, touch your finger in there, explosion of flavor. Like this as an innovation is just massive. So he really wanted to make Hawaii, and particularly the Big Island where he was, self-sustaining. And that was his vision then, which is now, of course, expanded, which is fabulous. And so to the point of acupuncture points and trim tabs. Everybody in this room probably knows what a trim tab is. Yes? Anybody not know? Yes, everyone knows. Okay.
Oh,
Don't know.
No. Yeah.
Okay. So Bucky Fuller made this very famous. because he wanted it on his epitaph. He wanted "Call me Trim Tab" on his epitaph, and I believe it is there. So, and forgive me if you're a sailor and you can correct me, but this is the layman's version. If you use the regular rudder to turn a boat, it makes a nice big arc. But if you use this little teeny tab that's at the base right next to the boat, you can flip that boat very sharply and very quickly in an emergency. It's not really good for the boat, but it allows you to flip the ship. And so that's what he was always looking for. That's what he wanted to be. I've taken that on. I want to be a trim tab too. And I look for, I collect trim tab people and trim tab projects, and Earth Regenerator's full of them, which is great. But in light of our conversation, there are a few things I wanted to bring up. One, we so easily say earn a living. And I think that is a fundamentally flawed phrase. That the idea that we have to earn the right to live is so ludicrous. And I made that shift. I became aware of that actually in my 20s, didn't want to. And I've actually held a quote unquote job only a few times in my life. So don't feel bad, Victoria. I'm allergic to not just business as usual, but particularly that whole machinery, just going to a place and doing what somebody else wants you to do and collecting a paycheck. And, it is really seductive after you've become accustomed to that regular check, because you finally feel safe, right? Because you feel like, the ground is not shifting as much underneath you. And so it is quite seductive and very difficult to get off that, particularly if you buy what the culture sells you, which is that you should have a mortgage and a house, and you should have a car payment and a car, and, get your degrees and go into debt for that. And almost everything is a sales pitch for a financial instrument that's going to indebt you for as long as possible. When you wake up to that, it is, first of all, really disappointing. And second of all, it's very challenging to escape. Now, I was fortunate because the GFC, the global financial crisis, completely undid me. Rug pull. And so I had to go through a lot to wake up to this lie I had been sold and I had bought. Even though I thought I was a very independent radical thinker, that was nothing compared to when I woke up to how our systems work at a deep level. And I went into studying that and understanding how it works. So I'm very interested in what, Jonathan, you've raised about doing money in a new way. That's actually where my whole, and I don't like calling it money, but money is more like it, circulation. Because humans, Fred Harrison is an amazing economic writer. He's not an economist in that sense, who has posited that what makes human beings really different is that we figured out ways to generate extra energy. So most animals, most species on the planet generate enough energy to survive, thrive, and reproduce, and that's it, right? And then they keep themselves going. We generate more energy than we need, and that's probably down to fire and agriculture, and then subsequent forms of extra energy like fossil fuels in the ground that we find. And so we've generated an entire different world that we inhabit He calls this the social galaxy. And the thing is that thing has spun out into so much abstraction now that it's challenging our planet, and we're challenging ourselves with it. So that awareness has been really helpful for me, because what I see in the economic world is that we have two kinds of economy that we're not aware of. One is what we would call the real economy, which is growing food and living. It's all of the elements of what we require to survive, and that's more and more basic needs include things like electricity and communications, right? Those are now necessities, and they weren't. And that kind of is the trajectory of humans now, that we are increasing our capacities, and as we do, our quote unquote needs, which creates new opportunities for more financial instruments to enslave us. So this is a vicious cycle that some of us are dedicated to finding an alternative to. So two things I want to say about that. One, the land prices, Patty, that you were mentioning, real estate, this is happening all over the world. And what people are not aware of is that it's cyclical, and it happens at this phase of these patterns that we've created in this crazy social galaxy. And frighteningly enough, it's probably going to get worse in the next little while. And it has to do with the way that that the system is set up. And what we don't see behind the curtain is that we're actually still in feudalism. It's just an economic feudalism. And the value that humans create will always go back into the land. And so we've created this boom and bust cycle that we go through over and over again. We are in the middle of a boom, and everything pitches into the land toward the end of the boom. So land prices will do this. What a horrible thing to be dealing with now, when we are, offering ourselves to be stewards in the way that we are meant to be. So for me, there's great hope in land trusts and cooperatives, in moving ourselves in the direction of scale if we are entrepreneurial enough, because I think people will want to step across from the nightmare that's coming at some point soon. And I'll end with this and then be quiet. I began my journey in this direction asking the question, because my background is tech. I'm in blockchain, and I was a pioneer in the internet and all this stuff. So I was looking way back when, in the 90s, asking this question: do we as humanity have the capacity to feed, clothe, shelter, and care for every man, woman, and child on the planet? And the answer, when I did my homework, was yes, absolutely. We have more than enough. And we had more than enough already since the 70s. So the question then, and the question for me now, is if we have the capacity, what is holding back our choice to do it, to make right livelihood possible for every person? Bucky said it. He said, if everyone in the world did what they were supposed to do, every job would get done. I agree with that. So over to you, Karen.
So rich, the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think about the appreciation of real estate, because when we sold our house at Eco Village, I was like, wow, we basically earned $10,000 a year just for holding a mortgage, right? That's how our house had appreciated, and it hadn't even gone crazy like a lot of the markets have. so in that sense, it worked in our favor. And then, like you're saying, like there's also this economic engine that's making it hard for people to survive within these kind of gentrifying dynamics and whatnot. And I saw this so poignantly in Costa Rica because I lived with an indigenous family. And they were talking about how, there's just so much that's out of their reach now because, foreigners are coming in and, for $250,000 to buy a lot, that looks cheap to people who have sold something in San Francisco, right? So it's like, wow, what a great deal. And you snatch it up, but you're immediately not just driving prices up, but you're this dilemma that the indigenous community that I was in has is like, if they continue their indigenous ways, then their kids don't get to participate in the things that look like progress to the kids and the peers, right? And so there's this really intense neo-colonizing, really, like that's really how it looks to me when I go there, and so like that's a big question for me, is how do I do this in a way that I'm not just contributing to that. So, I guess the question, we've been talking about this, the way that systems are set up, all of that is happening because of the systems that are set up. And why are those systems set up? Because of the mental models around, like, even the idea that we can own land, right? The idea that you can own land sets up a whole system, a systems of systems. And so, I feel like what I've been learning as a person who came into the regenerative work from permaculture, thinking, oh, I know a lot about regeneration because I've been in permaculture, I am continually bumping up against how ingrained the do-good or the mechanistic or whatever paradigm is in me. And my big question that I keep asking myself and others is, how do we know if something is like a project or an idea, or if we're trying to set up new systems, how do we actually have any hope of not just replicating, the same thinking that we're unaware of usually, that's gonna give us so many of these effects that you don't anticipate, and then before you know it, they're off to the races. And I think I feel like that actually is the leading edge. And Carol Sanford's brutal about it. Honestly, she's always taken everyone to task, and getting us to see, like, wow, I'm still stuck in non-regenerative thinking, older paradigm thinking. But I think that's, why do we consider a project regenerative? And I think we have to get kind of down the road on that before we're going to have a hope of designing systems that can be regenerative. Yeah, I'd just love to hear how folks are navigating all that.
I'll throw in just a few quick words. So I just finished a year ago a master's in bioanthropology after having left academia for 25 years. Just one of those really serendipitous routes, and just looking for some sort of stability. And it seemed to me, if I went back to my academic roots, because I don't have a place that I call home in that, being connected to the land. Formative years were out in Alberta, and now I'm out in Ontario. So it's been a pretty unpredicted route that has unfolded. But the thing I really found within that framework is the colonial aspect of the institution is what really started to scream at me towards the end of the degree. These institutions are self-protecting systems that are designed to hold on to that framework. They can't let go. I mean, anthropology specifically was the racial science that allowed for all of what we have seen. So I've got this journey of understanding where we came from and then reflexively looking back, but still seeing the institution hanging on to that foundation. And I can assure you, all of biological anthropology, all of the theories, all the aspects of the bones, all of it is still completely founded in those original concepts, because you just build systems off the foundations you create. The last year and a half, my supervisor had grown up, her formative years were in South Africa as a mixed person. And so she was very pulled to the decolonial side of the conversations that were happening in anthropology. And I found that to be just a fascinating place to be in. And so for the last year and a half, I've been almost continual. Actually, Sam Talk was the book that really began the journey that I discovered, of course, through this group. And that began this process of realizing the need to consume viewpoints outside of the framework that I have been immersed in. I've been a fish in a fishbowl, unable to see other perspectives. And so for a year and a half, 2 years of consuming all sorts of literature, nonfiction, podcasts, and with so much tensions in Canada right now around Indigenous issues, it's just been there's been a deluge of information to work from, but also the misinformation that is weaved into that, because of course that system is still trying to protect itself from being taken down. And so I think the framework for me, JP mentioned, it's about Indigenous views. It's also this process. I learned through an author, and I'm trying to get to know her better. Her name is Patty Krawick. She's got a phrase that she refers to, unforgetting. And we've reached this place through a very long journey of very deliberate patterns, and we don't understand those patterns anymore. And if we can begin to deconstruct what has been lost and understand what was, it becomes this difference of individualism that we live in right now versus collectivism. And we don't even begin to have the tools to appreciate collectivism at all. Our legal system is constructed on individual rights, human rights, not on collective rights. And so that sort of framework, and you can see it in the Canadian legal system, between what was adopted from the British and that which was taken away from the collective rights of the people that were here before, I think that juxtaposition is critical to finding a pathway back to how do you live within a framework that appreciates the space, the footprint, our relationship to all of this. So that's sort of a bit of a summation of my journey of the last couple of years. Pass it off.
I'm also interested in what you're doing with bioanthropology now, Preston. Oh, good. No, I'm not the only one.
That's kind of funny, because I put a proposal together to do a PhD. Mm-hmm. My proposal was accepted a year ago in February, and for several reasons, I decided not to pursue it. Part of the problem was the framework of the system is too broken, and I didn't think my participation in that was going to contribute to, it was too big of a fight to try to begin deconstructing that framework in a field that is all full of people in very strong academic positions that would never let go of that which has contributed to their success. And so between that and a few other reasons at the time, I decided not to pursue the PhD. And so I'm in this transitionary period where I'm reevaluating what I'm doing. And that's been a part of that Indigenous consumption for a while. And hence now thinking Earth Regenerators is a pretty interesting place to explore this this no man's land
Mm.
of what the future might be.
I feel that because I actually seriously investigated doing a PhD in like 2003. And all the places I went to, I wanted to study agroecology, right? How trans cross-disciplinary could you be? And I was told over and over, you're going to have to study the genome on this nematode, that blah, 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 you know, and I was just like, oh, hell no. That's not agroecology in my brain. I was just like, no. And there was no, yeah, it's just exactly that. Like, it was just like, didn't want to be in the straitjacket of having to do that. The other thing that's coming up for me around the whole livelihoods thing, you know, a lot of the work that when I work with folks is archaeological, almost in the personal sense of what, because I firmly believe that all of our life experiences prepare us. So, you know, the skills that we've gathered along the way, whether they are ones that we got credentials for, or their core economy skills, right? Like the informal economy, the caring economy. I like to refer to actually a founder of a time bank called these the core economy, because without, you know, people taking care of other people, nothing actually is possible in the economy. So, you know, I have people really go through and do extensive inventories, you know, and update it. I'm like, update it. When I think about actually the time, like, look at the money and the time that a person has invested getting skills. Like, it's shocking the amount of money if you actually turn it into money. And sometimes that helps some folks kind of get over this thing of like, oh, I don't know how my skills aren't worth anything, or I've wasted my time, you know, or stuff like that. So there's that, but there's also like the challenges that we've faced, right? So I know, for example, women of color in academia who have had a horrible time, right? But then they are the people who can actually help other women of color in academia succeed. And, you know, people who have had trauma are often, you know, done the healing, are really good at supporting other people who are doing similar work, who also run up against their, you know, their trauma in the process of doing it. Public speaking, for example. But so there's all this part of presencing what a person's path has been. But then, you know, and I was just talking about this with a colleague today, like, I think another whole skill set that I think is probably much more of an Indigenous skill set and alive in Indigenous folks, is how do I sense into what's emerging around me so that I have that chance to make that contribution. And I'm not just imposing, oh, this is my great idea, but actually like it's really already alive, kind of, right? And I'm just kind of tuning into it. And I think that's really, you know, especially with land-based work, that's takes on a whole nother level. But yeah, I feel like that's a skill set we all need to develop.
I just want to note that Earth Regenerators is a petri dish for precisely that.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we have been doing for 3 years, is exploring how to be together and how to do things together.
Mm-hmm.
And find the kind of dance between design and emergence and action. Like, how do those interact?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a bumpy ride, I will say that, because,
you know, we're coming from the culture we're coming from the paradigms. And half the time, we don't even know the cultural assumption that has us in its grip. But with each other, we can discover them. And this is an environment where there is no shame or blame, because we know we have to feel our way forward together. Which is why this has been such an amazing place to be. But it takes time. It takes time, and it takes people who are willing to persist on that caring side you're referring to. And, you know, Jonathan mentioned this extraordinary magazine that one of us has just produced. The amount of time and care and energy that went into that, I mean, it's really astonishing. And so for me, it's like there are other currencies than money. We've been just taught about that is the only currency, and pretty much that's what matters. Your self-worth is your net worth, right? And to witness somebody create something of such generosity and such beauty, the Weave, this magazine, right? It's just like, oh my, it's breathtaking, you know. And we all, it's like, there's no question this needs to be supported, right? How do we do that in this crazy situation where property prices are doing this and nobody can find a place to live? Where I am in Western Australia, the rental inventory is 0.4 of 1%. That's because everybody who has extra properties rents them out for vacation rentals, and nobody wants to do a long-term lease. Likewise, people don't want to sell if they can get rental income. So not only are houses unaffordable, they're unavailable. Like, right? And so she's in a situation like that where she is, you know, where it's challenging as well. This is happening all over the world, that it's very expensive to live and getting more so. So there is a real need, I believe, for us to separate the caring economy, what I would call the real economy, from the casino economy, which is this debt-based monetary system full of instruments like mortgages and collateralized debt obligations and derivatives and cryptocurrencies and all of these things, because that world manufactures casino chips. This world, you know, grows food and cares for the land and for people. And what happens is they make a bunch of chips and then they flood this market with those chips and dilute everyone. And they keep doing it, and we keep letting them because we believe they're baloney. I'm dating myself. Who says baloney anymore? Anyway, Victoria.
Oh, that's great. I know. I am interested if Karen, sorry, probably after your trip to Mexico. How long is your trip?
We're gonna do probably a road trip for a month, and then I'd probably stay in Mexico for a while longer, but I'll be online, you know, I won't be
I
offline.
see, I see. So I was wondering, because we haven't, Jonathan and I thought we'd start this to see what would happen. And we've had wonderful conversations. And I think what is needed is some kind of process, which perhaps you could fill the opportunity for. And I'm wondering what, since you've been doing this for a number of years with people, what you might need to be able to offer something to ER. You know, we use the gift economy. You're probably pretty familiar with that, but people have Patreon and other ways of getting donations, a donation-based economy, you know, might say. Because I don't know that there's a lot more that we can, you know, other than having, you know, a couple of new people each time, but then they don't necessarily come back because there's not a process for people to work through themselves or find themselves in a constellation of things that you've probably researched and understand what's out there and all that. So wanted to just give you the floor and see what we might do, because Jonathan and I are not, this was not what we intended for it to end up as, is just a free-flowing conversation every week, without grounding it in some kind, without coming up with something that people can use, because that's what people are looking for.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. Because I was actually, thinking about it in terms of, I often talk to folks about, like, are you tending your precious time and energy budget? So, I've got my own mighty network with, courses and community and whatnot. And that's already a full-time job. So, trying to think through how that makes sense. I've actually not even launched that for a while because I've been doing other stuff like traveling and stuff. But trying to think how it would make sense. And I'm specifically nowadays, there's other folks doing Right Livelihood stuff very sweetly and wonderfully that you might want to actually reach out to. And I can give you their names, but I'm really realizing that, like, so for example, my Pathfinders course, which is, a very robust way supporting folks to figure out what their right livelihood path might look like. It's not only for people who are interested in entrepreneurship, but all of the work that we do in that, it supports people to decide if they want to go into entrepreneurship. And then all of the work that we've done in that actually translates into the next phase if their people are actually going to try to put together, figuring out if there's something they can put together. And that's where I'm really focusing. So not everybody, I think, wants to do that. So that's just one thing I want to acknowledge. Yeah. And I guess the question I have is, like, what are you seeing folks are really struggling with, or really needing and wanting? Because that might help me see, like, there could be something, some smaller series of things, that could be useful.
Well, I think that the common threads, very broadly, I'm in a job I hate, but I'm making money.
Yep.
It's not the area I want to be doing, and not using my skills and passions.
Yeah.
And I have a family, I have commitments, often. And the second is, I've extracted myself from that extractive economy. I'm doing various things until I find my way, but I don't know what my way could be to earn money, whether it's entrepreneurial or not. And yeah, those are the two basic things. It probably consumes everybody. I mean, it probably puts everybody in the same, but if somebody else might have other things, and Jonathan might have other things. But that gives you an idea. That not surprising.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that we rarely talk about, but I know this is a part of it, is how can you minimize your costs by changing the way you live, who you live with, just rejiggering your budget and seeing, if you want to keep paying for these things and doing these. So that's another take on it, but that still doesn't deal with how do I generate income. That's mostly what people are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody else could jump in if they see something that I haven't said about what people are looking for or what you are looking for.
Well, I'd just like to speak up for the young people,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
they have no freaking idea.
Yeah.
And it is tragic what's happening
Yeah.
with our young people. We're losing them, to be quite honest. So I just want to raise that. Many of my young friends in this space, they are constantly vacillating between, they're manic, they're manic depressive, right? They're either super stoked and super excited and thrilled and putting their energy into something, or they're deeply depressed and borderline suicidal. And my heart goes out to them. I am deeply grateful that I got to grow up when I did. I would not want to be a young person right now. So I just want to speak up that there's a different set of parameters for them. Also, because they look at the, the old paradigm and go, yeah, no, I'm not participating in that at all. I'd rather stay at home, right? And they don't even go there. But then they are sitting on their parents, for example. We have some people in the community whose kids in their 20s are still at home. And this is not unusual now. So I just want to, there's special considerations, I think, also with where we are in our lives, time-wise, and on that trajectory.
Well, one of the things that occurs to me is that there's a reality that's almost hidden in plain sight, which, if we were the six of us right now in Ukraine, we'd have a much clearer idea of what we needed to do, because the dangers and the pressures and the menace are immediate. And yet we live in this world where that's happening, at a different level. I mean, they're not incoming missiles, but they're definitely incoming damaging, highly destructive forces. And yet, when people look around, if you ask somebody who's going through this agony of how do I let go of my job, or how do I let go of my income, and you say, look, supposing I gave you $20,000, what would you do with it? How would you create something that could sustain you and give back what is needed for the next person to get through this? And I think that aspect of reciprocity is part of what's missing, as well as the aspect of, what your public responsibility is. Given what you see is happening around you, get to work organizing people to deal with that. If we have a problem, which we do with real estate and ownership, get organizing community land trusts and cooperatives and working together on these things. And yes, it's not easy to get started, but the idea that we're just going to give people money and let them do kind of whatever kind of lovely things they kind of fantasize would be a regenerative life for them as individuals, but is not putting their shoulder to the wheel for the community, is, it's just, I don't see it working at all. And I think some of that kind of fantasy inhabits the world of Vivero that you and I work on all the time, that people don't see that if they get something through Vivero, their responsibility is to give back 10 times what they got. Now, some people do appreciate that, and it doesn't always have to be in money, but it has to translate ultimately into a kind of I don't want to call it a safety net, but a ground on which we can all stand and do things together that are contributory to the planet, to the land, and to the community. So, for me, it's not, it's pretty obvious what there is to get done. And, and I kind of gravitate toward it, just like, when I left my bureaucratic job with the Canadian government back at the end of the 1970s, I looked around and I said, people aren't building houses right. We need to start building houses in a different way. And so I started, and other people in the community started passive solar design and construction. And I didn't know anything about it. And I stubbed my toe half a dozen times. And eventually figured out what I needed to do, at least to make something happen in that domain. Well, I can't do that anymore. I'm 78. So I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do is see if I can do something about the tree canopy in Rochester, New York, because the way in which Rochester is organized, like many other cities, is that you live in this beautiful treed suburban environment, or you live in the worst, kind of dusty, dirty, denatured environment, surrounded by concrete. So we're going to do something about that. Now, how do we get the money to do it? I don't know. But I'm convinced that if we can get enough people working together to do that, we can figure that out. And the same thing with, we have to stop spewing carbon into the atmosphere. So we're going to start decarbonizing buildings. Now, again, these happen to be things that I gravitate towards because I know how to do them, but it seems to me you do the same thing in Ukraine. If you were in that situation, you would make use of what you had where you were to do what you could for the cause that you believed in. And I think that's kind of where we need to drive people to see that it's happening and they're pretending that it's not. So I don't know, I get on my soapbox and rant a little bit, so I apologize for that. But JP?
I love your rant, Jonathan. Thank you. It's passion like that that's going to change the world. We need more of it. I want to touch on your point about the community, because culturally, this is the crux of it. The crux of it is that our paradigm channels us into silos increasingly, and people feel alone. This is one of the great blessings of this community, is no longer feeling alone. If you hang out long enough with earth regenerators, there are others, who share your passion, Jonathan, right? And maybe not in the exact same thing, but in a very related thing. And we also know that we've got to lift a number of boats. The water has to lift a number of boats in different spots. So it's our togetherness that has been kind of systematically eradicated from us, to where there's the inclination is to distrust first. You have to earn my trust the same way you have to earn a living, right? And this we can't just automatically assume, because there's so much wounding and trauma, that we can enter into a new paradigm of living together or even working together, because of this background siloing and distrust and mistrust, and now disinformation and misinformation. That sense making is so challenged. Being together and building trust. And this is why the whole bioregional catalyst movement, I think, is so important, that we find and honor the people who have been doing the work and do the connecting work, whether that's local or global, to build this sense of togetherness. Because if we feel alone, we don't feel responsible for anyone but ourselves. And our culture pushes us back into the reptile mind of survival over and over and over again. So it takes a while to build the muscle that allows you to reach out, to have the courage to reach out and risk that maybe somebody shares your viewpoint, or maybe they don't, and you can just be okay with that. I've learned myself, having, as a great deal of passion, that two things. One, I just let myself rip now. I don't care. I ask the kinds of questions in company that elicit long silences because they're big, right? And people are like, oh shit, I don't know if I want to talk about this. And I used to be really fussed about it. And now I just let it be there. And also there are times when all I need to be is a good listener and a good human, and to let this person feel that I care about them, no matter who they are, right? And in this moment, in this interaction. So I vacillate between the two things, two ways of being. But my point is really about, we have to find our way back to our togetherness, to take responsibility for the community, because all the ways we've been taught are take care of yourself and maybe your family, and the rest, it's too much, right? So, Victoria.
Thank you, JP. Always love being with you and what you have to say and share. Karen, I wanted to come back to you in the last few minutes because this usually goes on until 6:30, and I really appreciate that you took Jonathan's invitation. Is there any way that you could respond or think about, what we might do, what you might do? I would love to hear at least, well, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely certainly very interested. I mean, the things that I feel from hearing what folks are struggling with are, it boils down to, what is my contribution that I can make? Where do I make that contribution? How does that fit within my life? Right. And I often talk about in different phases, we have different activating forces and different restraining forces. And so there's different opportunities, and it's important to think about the next ones that are coming down the pike, because I didn't know, nobody told me that. I ended up smacking the sandwich generation, that type of thing. Yeah, and then these whole questions of how do we discern what's calling us and in the wider world, and how to work with others. And I think it's rich. I think it could go on forever. So I think that the thing I'd love to think through is, how can we do it in a way that I could provide a nodal intervention that is really useful for the folks here, that also doesn't require me to put a ton of energy in, given that I'm trying to grow this other thing of my own. I'm sure there's synergies. I'd love to think about that with you folks. And if it's a structure of some of these questions that we work through together, that folks get to go on a deeper dive. The one about, how do I prepare my life to change, including having the conversations with beloveds, because often, we end up discovering we want to change things, and our beloveds aren't maybe on board, and we have obligations to family and whatnot. These are all huge things to talk about. So, we could probably drill down into the ones that are top of mind for folks. And then, they could decide if they want to jump into my program, or, offer something. I don't know.
Do you do individual, group, both?
The programs usually, there's the Pathfinder program has like 9 modules in it that people go through, and I usually do it as a cohort because it's more fun as a cohort. That's specifically the Pathfinders, and then the sweet spots too. So yes, typically I do it as a group, and people work through the modules on their own, and then we come together and discuss what they found in the modules, or they get coaching. A lot of internal stuff often comes up. A lot of internal stuff. So we will try to hold beautiful space for that for folks.
Well,
Mhm.
my.
Can you put
hope
a
is that
URL
together-
in there, by the
Hold
way?
on a second. My hope is that we'll use this space and this time to build a funnel, if you like, or a channel for people coming into Earth Regenerators and asking themselves this question. And we can point them in different directions. We can point them to your programs if
Mhm.
that's what calls to them and what they need to kind of work through for themselves, because there is a lot of stuff that people need to work through.
Yeah.
And then we can move them into working with Vivero or some kind of platform like that, where they can work on the economic challenge with for themselves and for others.
Mhm.
And so that's what I'm hoping that this can become. And that, that was my request for people to help us make this work, because that's, and we really started this thinking we'll do this once a month. We've ended up doing it twice a month because we're trying to accommodate times for people in
Right.
different parts of the world. And we still haven't got that together. So I'm absolutely open to suggestions and ideas so that we can bring in folks like the ones in the UK. And so that we don't have to get JP up at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is.
Right. Yes.
So
And do you have the courses function also? But do you have that? Are you able to create
yes,
learning spaces?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
And-
that could be interesting to think about.
Mhm.
Maybe we have topics or something that folks go through. And I definitely know of other folks doing other livelihood related work that we could point folks into in addition to me, because I think some folks are a better fit for some particular people than I am. Yeah, that
Yeah,
could be
we would-
fun.
And
Yeah,
the way that
Jonathan.
we've done learning journeys in Earth Regenerators is that it's on a suggested donation basis.
Mhm.
So then that does bring resources together, which can then be used to, at least in small ways, to enable others. And it has a structure to it, and it has an expectation that people will stick with it and get somewhere. Sorry, Victoria?
Oh, no, I think there's a whole lot of details to work out, especially if Karen hasn't been through learning journeys and how the money would work and what you need. And the other thing, Jonathan, I've been wanting, and maybe you did, put together a resource page so that if Karen has a list of other resources and your own resource, your course name and stuff like that, people do in ER, I think, do let people know this is what they do, privately, for their own, don't they? I think.
Oh,
They-
yes, absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
and it would be great to have some kind of a learning journey. I think we'd have a whole lot of people that would do that, and it would also,
Ah,
if
I think it would be fabulous if we had a learning journey on right livelihood.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to fall into the form of the way we've done learning journeys in the past. We can certainly do like a mini learning journey. So Karen, for example, maybe could do like a few things, and people would then know if they'd want to work with her, right? They would get something out of that experience together, and they can go work with her more deeply. Or we could do, she could pull together, a few others in the space that she knows, and it could be done together. I think the one thing though that we really tend to gravitate to in Earth Regenerators is that people are members of the community when they're bringing work. We've done, I think we did one where the person really wasn't part of the community, and it was a bit of an alienating experience
Mhm.
for the students. So that would be the only caveat there. But we've also had guests come in that have been super inspiring and wonderful. So yeah, we have the capacity. We could create a course right within Right Livelihood and promote it across the platform. I think it would be really fun, or even a one-off workshop to kind of, get people interested. That might also do. Like, let's see if there's enough interest to even do a learning journey. So we sandbox a lot here.
Mhm.
And we have capacity to do that. And I give Mighty Networks a lot of credit because it really does allow you to do those things. Everything from, shall we just have a conversation, to full on rigorous course and trainings, and everything in between. So yes,
Speaking
to
of
answer your question, we have the
sandbox,
capacity.
yeah, I mean, is it possible we could do a carrying the conversation, and then when Karen is away, that, we could just be as as you have time, go in and see what people are saying and add some things, and it's a kind of a continuing, I don't know how that works well, whether that works well.
We've
but-
already got Right Livelihood as its own space.
Mhm.
And we can
Right.
do anything in that space
I
that
think
we
that we would need something about, a course, like something separate, so that it's not, yeah.
yeah, it's entirely doable. So yes.
Yeah,
And I
course
think
or-
would love to receive your work.
Thanks. I'm so excited about the invitation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be fun to think more about what's possible, and yeah.
Oh, and by the way, Karen, there's a couple of us that have done TRP with Drew
Great.
Jensen.
You and who else?
And Joel Krieger. Do you know Joel?
Sounds really familiar.
He is an amazing designer.
Okay.
Really had his head turned around in taking the course. It's really fun to listen to him.
It'll do that.
Yeah, right. And actually, you know something? Why don't, Jonathan, can you help Karen find the podcast that Joel did,
Oh, yeah,
interviewing
sure. I can do
Pamela
that.
and Joel?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
You would enjoy that. And you
Yeah.
can get
Yes, I
away
would.
you can get his experience of doing the course through that. And he is an incredible resource and generous contributor to ER on and off. And I know he's had his,
Hmm.
coming to Jesus about how he makes money and, in the regenerative space and stuff like that. So this doesn't have to happen overnight, but Jonathan, can you send that to Karen?
Yeah,
And
Yeah, he already
I'll
did.
post some things. It's called Outside In. There are several podcasts like that, but you want to look for the one with Joel.
Great.
And I forget the name of his partner.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Pavani
Pavan.
Yala.
Yeah.
Oh, you were there already?
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
but I'd like to, since we are over time, I'd like to see if Preston and Patty would like to say some things on the way out. We usually have a checkout, and all of us have been dominating the space. So where are you left with this? Patty?
I really appreciated Karen's statement about the neo-colonialism that she's witnessed. That really touched me deeply, and I can feel that. I do a lot of work with Thomas Hubel. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know who that is.
Mhm.
And colonialism is always a big topic in that space. And so, yeah, that's where I spend most of my time, is doing that work and getting in alignment with that, which I don't know how it's all playing out, but I've been deep diving in that ocean. So this was really wonderful. Thank you for having this meeting.
Well, we love having you, and please come back and keep pushing us forward. Preston?
Yeah, it's been a really good journey. It's very interesting because this earlier today, in Benji's session with bioregional activation, which yes is coming to Toronto, so I'll be following that pathway for a little while here. But for the last couple of years, it's been the concept of living with one foot in one system and one foot trying to find a place in the other system that might arise. And therefore, having both of these running parallel right now, I think is a very good pathway for the next stretch of time. Because it's really hard to see what is going to provide what opportunities, and where we find that space that works for where we're at the moment. So a little tired, a little overwhelmed, but very excited about all the prospects here. It's been wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you all. This is really an honor to be able to do this. I don't know, some of you may also be familiar with Landmark. It's one of the things that we've done a lot of work in. And one of the things I always noticed about the programs in Landmark was how much the facilitator got in terms of just the wealth and richness of humanity that is on display and is, calling to us to make these connections.
It is.
Great, thanks. I got to run to another thing in 15
Yeah,
minutes.
thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. I look forward to
everyone.
being in touch.
Great.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you and happy
Bye.
holidays.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.